Got it.
All right, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, May 1st, 2025, with the fabulous Chris Speier, former Giant shortstop. We'll get to him in a second. Today marks the beginning of May and the honoring of Willie Mays' birthday. May, the month of May. So for the next 4 weeks, we will be honoring, even though he's not with us anymore, we'll be honoring his birthday and his memory. Next week, I will be addressing the group. The following week, we will have John Shea, followed by John Miller, followed by Pat Gallagher. Um, Also on May's birthday, May 6th. I've never done this before. I'm going to try to get the YouTube channel live. Whoever shows up in there, might want to reflect on Willie. I don't know if anybody will show up. I'm not asking you guys. Who there are, I don't know how many, 416 subscribers. Maybe some will just want to pop in, and never know. Maybe they'll join our group. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I told you that on May 6th, I'll be at the Hall of Fame. I'll be in Cooperstown on Willie's birthday.
great.
And from what I
Um,
understand with the weather forecast, we're going to be indoors most of the time during that trip.
okay. Um, Anyway, we're going to turn our attention to Chris Speier. Chris was, of course, a former teammate of Willie Mays in 1971, and throughout his career with the Giants, both of them, throughout the years. I'm sure they were acquainted on many occasions. Um, when I was in 1971, I was 10 years old and really starting to follow baseball. And Mays and McCovey and Marichal were, almost they're getting old and on their way out. And when there were two guys I really treasured, and that was Chris Speier and Bobby Bonds. And as a 10-year-old, Chris was my guy. He really was. And I know they honored Brandon Crawford the other day with his another shortstop who wore number 35. And I'm sure after Verlander, retires or leaves the Giants, the number will be retired. But in my heart, number 35 was always Chris Speier. Chris, he meant so much to many Giant fans growing up, but to me, you were just the celebrity. And last summer at the Willie Mays Celebration of Life, I was there with Norm Coleman. We got out of the car, and I said, if there's one guy I would love to meet today, it would be Chris Speier. And as Norm is my witness, we got out of the car. We turned by the Orlando Cepeda statue where I lost my sunglasses. And lo and behold, it was Chris Speier. And I said, Norm, it's Chris Speier. And Norm looked at me. He goes, it is. And we had a nice little conversation. Chris even agreed to do a little 10-second video for a friend of mine who was sick. So just a great thing. Uh, Broke my heart as a kid when somehow Giant management decided to trade him for Tim Foley, which I just couldn't believe. But in 1987, Chris came back to the Giants and loved it. He had a great season and helped them to, win the division and everything. So Chris tonight is going to talk about his time he spent with Willie Mays on and off the field, talk a little bit about his career, and then we'll open it up to questions. But why don't we all welcome the great Chris Speier. Chris,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I'm almost speechless, even though I spoke a lot.
Yeah.
The
Well,
floor
thank
is
you.
yours.
All right. Thank you so much. I have to say, it's easy for me to remember Willie's birthday, May 6th. I have a son that has birthdays on May 6th. So it was always pretty easy for me to remember that. And you talked about 1971, and I grew up across the bay from San Francisco. And I remember going to the old Seal Stadium and watching the Giants play. And then, we saw them a few times over at Candlestick Park, and I don't know if we made it through the game because I was frozen because of the weather. But I was at God, I was, 10, 11, 12 years old growing up and listening to those guys. So you can imagine when I was invited to Major League camp in 1971. Funny story about that was Charlie Fox was the manager of the Giants back then, and he had seen me play uh, in the instructional league, and I remember they sent me a AAA contract to go to spring training with AAA. And I called Charlie and I said, Charlie, I know what you have at short. Just invite me as a non-roster player and I'll be your opening day shortstop. What an idiot I was. Cocky. Oh my God. Anyway, it worked out that way.
Yeah.
So it's opening day and 40,000 people. And I remember running out to the field and looking out at center and seeing Willie Mays. Willie McCovey is throwing me ground balls in between the first pitch. And the first pitch is Juan Marichal. And I literally said to myself, excuse my French, what the fuck am I doing here? You gotta be kidding me. I was so scared that and nervous in my first at bat in the big leagues. I couldn't swing and I walked. And you know, Willie came up, patted me on the butt, said, just relax, kid. And Charlie Fox, the manager, figured out a way to make me swing. He put a hit and run on, and I hit a double. So that was my opening day experience because, as a kid growing up, watching the great Willie Mays and the other great players with McCovey and Marichal and Perry and Bonds and all these guys, uh, I just thought I was really out of my element. And one thing about Willie, and I think most of us realize, he had, he had so many people that always wanted, to be around him. And he had this way of, kind of creating a little barrier, around himself. And but I remember when I made the team, we had a very minimal scouting report on the people that we were going to be playing. And so a lot of it was passed on by the players. And I remember I went up to Willie and I said, hey, Willie, I said, I don't know any of these guys that we're going to be facing. What do you think they're going to try to do, against me? And he said, well, kid, just get ready because they're all going to throw right at your head. First time they see you, they're going to throw at you to see if they can intimidate you. So just hang in there, get up, get back in there and swing. He says, hell, they're still throwing at me, so just get used to it. And so that kind of opened the door with Willie and I because I would go up and I said, okay, we got so-and-so pitching tonight. What do you think? Well, his best pitch, especially with two strikes, he's going to try to throw a slider down the way to strike you out. If he gets in a jam or whatever, he's going to come back with a fastball. That would be a good pitch for you. And he would go over the pitching. And, it was a time of my career where that was the kind of scouting report we had. And Willie kind of, he kind of looked forward to that because he knew, that if I could help the team a little bit, offensively, then we had a pretty good chance. So it was one of the things that I loved about Willie. Was I have to say that, it was probably the best instruction I ever had in regards to scouting reports, uh, and help in facing the opposition. And he was another guy that, they talk about sign stealing and all that stuff today. And that was one of the first things they kind of talked to us about in spring training was, hey, when you get on second base now, you get in there and you start picking the sign, try to pick up the signs from the catchers. He says some of these catchers are stupid. They're just going to put down one or a couple of signs. You'll pick them up, and then you can relay those on to the hitter. Well, Willie, he 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 made it. He went one step further, and he would get him from first base. He would take a lead, and he'd get out there far enough to where he could peek around that catcher's knee and see the signs. So, he said, "Kid, I don't want you trying this because you'll probably get your ass picked off." He said, I can get out there. I know I got, a way of seeing that pitcher and what he's doing. But if you want the signs, just let me know. Just touch your hat. And I said, oh, hell yeah, I'll take the signs. My God, So, but he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. And I'll tell you an example of one. So we're playing in New York. And Willie in New York, a big, big man. We had a night game. And about 9:30 in the morning, my phone rings and it's Willie. And he goes, hey, kid. He said, get your ass down here in 15 minutes. And I said, Willie? And he goes, yeah, Willie, come on down. So I go down there and I go, what? Hey, Willie, what's up? You want to go over? He says, no, we're not going over the pictures now. We do that at the ballpark. Come on, we're going somewhere. So go outside and there's a limo there for Willie. He says, get in. So I get in. We go down to the garment district. And they park the car. And you're familiar with the garment. There's just store after store after store after store. Well, the word got out that Willie was coming to the garment district. And there had to be 500 to 1,000 people just lined up ready for Willie to come out. And he'd go into a store and he had some pictures. He'd hand a picture and the guys would say, hey, take whatever you want. Go ahead, take whatever you want. And I'm going, oh my God, this is amazing. So we go to the Izod store. It's that little alligator, golf shirts guy. And he said, hey, and the guy's name was Joe. And he said, hey, Joe, do you think you can take care of the kid? And he goes, yeah, oh, yeah, sure. Kid, what size you? Whatever. He says, you have any family? And I said, well, yeah, I have a wife, medium, whatever. You have any kids? And I said, well, not yet, but we're trying. He said, well, when you get kids, I had Izod for 10 years sent to my house because of Willie. And but that's a side that Willie always was thinking when you got past that barrier he always had that side that he wanted to help, always helped. And he told me also one of the things he said, now listen, when you go out to eat, you tip really well. You don't tip no 20%. You tip at least 30 to 40%. You need to help these people out of working their ass off. We're out there playing a game. You help these people, and what a man. Yeah, some great, great memories, that I have. But if you guys have any questions, feel free.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to start it off. First of all, I should have mentioned to you this New York Giants Preservation Society.
Uh-huh.
The reason we're all together mostly, most 95% of the people in here still root for the Giants. Why? Because of Willie Mays.
Mm.
That's the reason. And you, I must say, are beloved in here. I know you played, 50 something years ago, but you're still mentioned often, and you really should know that. Uh,
Thank you.
Two questions.
Yeah.
When Willie got dealt to the Mets, you were still, of course, on the team.
Mhm.
Uh, how'd you feel? What was going through your head?
Well, we had just come off winning the division, and you know, everybody, felt, we're in contention again. And I'm, I'm not sure what happened behind the scenes. If that was something that Willie was, involved in about getting back to New York, his final days and years, which I could understand that part. But as a player and as a friend and a mentor, uh, it was really crushing, a little bit. Plus, there was an eye-opening experience to go, oh my God, nobody's safe. If they're gonna trade Willie Mays, shoot, it's open season on any of us. And but it was hard, it really was hard. And I don't his presence was so great in the clubhouse, wherever we went. We didn't draw that well at Candlestick Park, unless we were, in the pennant race or anything like that. But everywhere we went, I think we might have been one of the, if not the most, the visiting team that drew the most people. And, I would have to say it was all Willie Mays. Everybody wanted to see Willie.
And my second question is directed to your playing career. I already mentioned how disgusted I was when you were traded for Tim Foley. Uh, Bring us back to when you came back to the team. How that felt? What went on to bring you back to the Giants where you belonged?
Oh gosh. That was a godsend. I was 85 and 86. At that time, I had played 12 or 13 years as a shortstop, and I wanted to continue to play, but I knew, that probably playing every day was probably out of the question. So I said, when I went to Chicago, I signed there as a free agent. I was living in Phoenix, and they spring trained in in Arizona, and I remember going and talking to Dallas Green with the Cubs, and I said, "Hey, you know, I know you got Larry Boa. He's on his downcline. I'd love to come and be a utility infielder for you guys, and not taking Larry's job or anything like that, but giving people a day off and helping out." So I did that for 2 years. And one of our coaches, our third base coach, was Don Zimmer. Well, after that season, Roger Craig brought Don to San Francisco, and they were having discussions in the winter about the team and the needs. And Don, they said, well, it'd be nice to get a good utility guy, a guy who can play short and play all over. And Zimmer said, shoot, I got the best guy for you. Chris Speier used to be a Giant. Yeah, he did a hell of a job with the Cubs. And bingo, that's how that happened. It was Don Zimmer that made the recommendation, and I ended up going back to San Francisco in '87.
I got to tell you, it's great seeing you still associated now back with the Giants. So, before we turn over to the other people with questions, one gentleman could not be here tonight, Jim Mully. He's a regular. He wanted me to tell you you were his favorite player growing up, and because of you, he purchased a Chris Speier baseball glove model
Well,
and he still has it to this day. So that's for Jim.
can I expound on that
Sure.
a little bit? So back in the day, I had a Rawlings contract. They sign you right out of as soon as you sign any professional contract. Louisville wants to sign you to get a bat, and Rawlings was big in getting the glove. And I didn't like any of the Rawlings gloves, and I liked the Wilson gloves. So I got out of my Rawlings contract, and they were a little angry about that. But after a couple of years, Wilson decided to put a name on a glove, and sell it for, I don't know, $20 or whatever. And so I used to get a check every year for about $5,000, from the royalties of that glove. And I'm going, man, this is awesome. So Freddie Lynn comes along, has the MVP, Rookie of the Year season or whatever. And Wilson decides to put his name on a glove. And they called me and said, "Hey, sorry, but we're going to put Freddie Lynn's name in place of yours on a glove. We'll still give you gloves and all that stuff, but the royalty, you're not going to have a name on it." So about 10 or 15 years later, I see Freddie Lynn at a charity event, and I had not really met Freddie at all. He was an American League guy, I was a National League guy. And I go up to him and I go, "Fred?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Hi, Chris Speier." And I said, "Excuse my French." I said, "Fuck you, asshole." And he looks at me and he goes, "What?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just kidding. But you had such a they took my name off and put yours on, and I said, "No, I'm just kidding you. No problems." But anyway,
Great story.
yeah.
Once again, thanks for joining us. Mars, you're up.
Oh, thanks, Chris, for joining us. This is great. I have two questions for you. The first one was, who was your favorite manager and why? And the second one is, do you think in '87, the one flap down and the comment by another player, I won't name them because you know who they are, called St. Louis a cowtown, pissed off the Cardinal team and the fans and changed the momentum of the '87 playoffs?
Well, the one flap down, that I know who that, Jeffrey Leonard had that going on. That kind of thing, that wasn't anything that most people were used to seeing done. But that was Jeffrey, and the statements and things like that. As you don't need to add fuel to the flame there a little bit by popping off and saying something in the press that is going to go be put up on the clubhouse wall and that players can look at. I don't know if it was a momentum shift. I think the shift was when Atlee Hammaker threw Jose Oquendo a hanging breaking ball that he never should have thrown and hits a home run. I think that was the ball buster. But it's like I said, it's never good when you call a town a cow town or add anything like that. But yeah, they just kind of outplayed us during that time.
And who was your favorite manager and why?
Oh, gosh. I had a chance, and it was really a brief chance. I have to say Roger Craig, was one of my favorites all around. Everything around, Roger, his personality, the way he handled his players, his communication skills, his baseball knowledge. I like the way that he delegated responsibility to his other coaches. But there was one guy that I had, and I was not a Giant at the time. I was in Montreal, and Dick Williams was the manager. Uh, Dick had a way about him that it, you really didn't want to sidestep or misstep at any time with him, especially if you were a pitcher. Dick didn't like pitchers very well. He took care of his everyday player, and I was really, at that time I was playing every day, and he took care of us. But he would do things that I would, as a baseball player, you kind of play manager a little bit, even as a player, because I think, at that time I was even thinking, maybe when I'm done playing, maybe to go into, so, you kind of play manager a little bit. And he would do things and I would go, what the heck? And they'd work. They always worked. And I went, oh my God, I don't understand how he comes up with this stuff. Well, I found out how he does. He was one of the first guys that I ever saw. Dick used to get to the ballpark really early, and he had all these charts that he was writing in defensive alignments, statistics against certain pitchers, hitters, and he had all that stuff out, and he was always adding to it. And he was probably the most prepared manager that I've ever seen. And so I had a tremendous respect for him.
Thank you, Chris. And
Welcome.
you were a big favorite at the stick, and I thought you were a terrific shortstop.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Hey, Chris.
Hi.
I want to thank you for coming here today. You're possibly the most riveting storyteller we've had on all of our Zoom meetings. It's really great.
I'm telling you all the stuff on the field. You should hear the stuff off the field.
I join the others in saying you're one of my favorites, and I will go so far as to say that you and Tito Fuentes, I believe, are the best double play combination in the Giants' history. Just watching you on the field was a pleasure. I have a message for you from Rick Swig. He says hello. He's sorry he can't be here, and he wanted you to know he's a member of this organization.
Okay.
And he said you'd laugh about that, but I'll tell him you didn't laugh.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. I laugh. Yeah.
My question is expanding Gary's question about Willie leaving San Francisco. I was there his first game back for the Mets when he hit the home run.
Yeah.
And I was thrilled. Even though it was against the Giants, absolutely thrilled to be there to see him hit that home run. I'm wondering how you felt as his friend and opposing player at that time when he hit the home run.
Well, you know, I'm gonna give you a comparison. Here's a comparison. You tell me how you would feel. I'm coaching third base. At the time, I'm a coach. And my son is pitching for the Colorado Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the 8th inning. And we're down by a run. We have the tying run on second base. And my son's pitching. And he strikes out the guy to end the inning. And I gave a small fist pump. Yes. So the comparison, okay, and it was so funny because the players on the team saw me do that fist pump because they understood the situation. And they jumped on my ass and they kept saying, hey, who signs your checks? Does your son sign the check? No. Stop rooting for the other team. And again, when Willie hit that home run, it was like, I said, this is perfect. This is just perfect. I was happy. I sad to say, but yeah, it was like, oh, this is fitting, really fitting. So,
Thank you, Chris. I was hoping you'd say something like that. Thank you.
yeah.
Bill Klink, you're up.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Chris. I'm going to take you down memory lane ways, then I'm going to take you a little bit further back. But before I do that, we've talked a lot today about your fielding abilities, but understated is your ability to hit in the clutch. I'll just cite two examples. In the 1971 NLCS that the Giants lost, Bobby Robertson had much to do with that, obviously. You had nothing to do with it because you hit 357, you had 5 hits, 2 doubles, and a homer. You could field well, you hit well. We couldn't have asked any more from you then. In 87, in 81, when you were playing for Montreal in the divisional series, remember you had to get through 2 series to get to the World Series. You remember that. Well, that first one, you didn't even make it to the second round if you didn't get through that stupid divisional series. You hit 400 and you had 2 doubles. I mean, yeah, if you look at your overall batting average, it was good, not great, but
No, it wasn't.
there's 2 times when, a lot of guys went in the dumper. I'm not going to cite examples, but they did. You talked about your first year. It might be hard to see it, but you're on that. This is 1970. This is the Amarillo roster from their play.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that was, that is hard to believe. The guys that you played with on that, Jim Barr was on that team with you, Dave Rader, Chris Arnold, Jim Howarth, and of course Dave Kingman. So, boy,
Right.
you had a bunch of good guys on that team, and
Yeah,
some
we did. We
some of
only,
them came up with you.
we only finished 28 games behind the leading team.
I didn't mention that. I didn't go into those stats. You didn't have anything to do with that. I'm going to tell you a quick story and ask you your reaction because you'll remember this fella. I think you'll remember this fella. In 1990, I had an interview with a company here in Phoenix called Family Life Insurance. And when I walked into the manager's office, I turned to the left and there was a plaque on the wall. And I could tell because of what it was that he was extremely proud of it, the placement of it. It was a plaque that heralded him as a member of the UCSB Gauchos Hall of Fame. And so your name didn't come up, but I'll bring his up. He won 12 games that year for the Gauchos in 1969. I think you were either a freshman or sophomore.
Was it Craig
remember? Do you remember who I'm talking about?
Was it Craig Shell?
No, it was John Schroeder.
Oh, John Schroeder. Okay.
John is a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And
All right.
he was a great manager. He was a guy that, in order to be efficient in his work in insurance, he had to learn Spanish. He self-taught himself.
Wow.
And he was fluent. He was one sharp guy. But there was a guy that, like you, was proud to go to Cal Santa Barbara. And I think you're in the Hall of Fame there too, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought you might remember him. I thought it'd bring back a memory of a guy that always spoke highly of Santa Barbara, and he may have mentioned your names a couple. I said, "You play with anybody?" I think he did say Chris Speier, obviously, and I knew that. I knew who you were. When you were a kid, you grew up in Oakland. I'm sorry, in Alameda,
Uh-huh.
and you grew up kind of a sort of a fan of those people that are down south in the other part of California. And there was one player who wore a number 4, and you wore his number for a while when you first came up. Can you tell us about you and Duke Snyder?
Yeah. It's just, it's a sibling rivalry that goes on in families. We weren't our family wasn't really fans of teams. We had things, but we grew up basically. My brother, my older brother, was a Giant fan, and I saw Duke Snyder. I think he was with the Dodgers at the time, hit a home run. And I went, oh my God, Duke Snyder. And I fell in love with Duke Snyder. And so, again, there wasn't a big to do about when the Dodgers played the Giants or anything like that. But that's that feeling that I had, of not really wanting the Giants to win was because of my brother. That's why I have to blame him.
You in high school, you did something I've done, and many of us have done, and we won't be arrested because the statute of limitations has expired on all of this. But we snuck onto the field, and you snuck onto the field one time in Oakland, I understand, and you hung around the batting cage with Carl Yastrzemski and Ken Harrelson. Do you remember that instance?
I do.
Tell us about that.
It was a day game, and we skipped school, and we used to sneak into Oakland Stadium all the time. That was only like 10 minutes from my house.
Right.
So, in high school, I wanted to go watch, and I used to just watch the shortstops. But Ken Harrelson came out, and he was the cat's meow. They had him on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They said they used to fly a helicopter to the ballpark. He's dressed in all these crazy looking Nehru jackets and stuff. And I said, oh my God, this guy is awesome. So I'm literally on the field. And, the security was pretty lax. And they thought maybe I was, some friend of a player. And I'm hanging around right behind the thing. And I pick up Ken Harrelson's bat to hand to him as he gets into the cage. And the knob had a little chip out of it. And he said, oh, I can't use that one, kid. You can have it. I used that bat for about a year and a half. I choked up on it. It had about 15 grains in it. And if you know anything about bats, the least amount of grains that you have that go across, that's more hardwood that's making contact. And I was like, oh my God. But I finally broke it. But anyway, so that's one of the stories about me sneaking in. I have another one that's actually really funny.
Oh, good.
You want to hear it?
I want to hear it.
Okay. We sneak in, and there's about 5 of us, and it was a night game, and they were playing Boston again. This was later on. I think I might have been a junior or senior, and we're sitting behind home plate up a little bit, and I think we might have had a few beverages during that time, maybe as high school kids. Anyway, a foul ball comes back, and I catch it, and I got the ball, and people are going, oh, congratulations, congratulations. And I'm faking like I don't understand English. And I told my buddies, I said, watch this. Jim Longborn is on the mound, and he's in his windup. I stand up, and I fire the ball at the mound. It hits the mound. Jim Longboard stops, looks all around. Everybody comes over. The security guards come over, and they said, what the heck you doing? What the heck you doing? And my buddies go, oh, hey, he's from Germany. He thought he was supposed to throw the ball back after it came in the stands. So I see Jim Longboard years ago, years and years and years later. And I asked him, I said, hey, you remember the time you were pitching in Oakland, that night game? Some idiot threw a ball, hit the mound. He said, oh, hell yeah, it scared the hell out of me, man. I almost twisted my ankle trying to stop. And I said, well, I have to apologize. That was me.
That's good.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Oh, that's
Larry
wonderful.
K,
I
you're
just
up,
had
Bill. I mean, Larry, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chris. Chris, you just made a comment. I used to watch just the short stops. I've been wanting to ask you about fundamentals
Hmm.
and and also the five tools. I'm writing an article on Willie and the five tools, and
How come I'm
it's
not involved in that?
well, you are now, bud.
Just kidding.
New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. A lot of people still like the old-fashioned light bulbs. They aren't
Excuse
really
me. Barry Margulie, shut off your
really got to
machine.
switch to LED. It saves.
So,
I apologize.
yeah, some of your thoughts about your own tools and about Willie's tools, and maybe something about practice and the
Well,
fundamentals.
I can't say that I think that by me watching a lot of the shortstops, um, play, and again, back then there was only a few Latin shortstops. You had Luis Aparicio, and a couple other guys that had, a different way of fielding, the one-handed come in on the run, that type of thing. But most of them were really, really basic, pretty, just like, all the books say, how to do that. And I kind of followed suit with that. One of the biggest things that I think helped me out, because I wasn't a fast guy. I mean, I didn't steal a lot of bases or anything like that, but I had pretty good first step quickness, you know. And one of the biggest things that when I grew up, both my parents were tennis players. And I grew up playing tennis and I played it competitively until I was about 12 or 13. And if you've ever watched return of service of what those players do right before that ball is being served to them, their feet get light, they move their feet, and I incorporated that, and I'm sure most guys do that now, but I think that kind of helped me a little bit was playing tennis.
Thank you. Dennis, you're up. Dennis Snelling.
Hi, Dennis.
Dennis, unmute.
Thanks, Chris, for being here. One I wanted to kind of build on before I have two questions, but one I wanted to build on the story that you talked about Willie Mays and the character he was. I recently talked to Jack Hyatt for another project I'm working on, and a very similar story. It just shows you how Willie really just looked out for the young players on the team and says a lot about who he was. My first question has to do with the 1971 season when you guys were way ahead most of the year, and then from mid-September on, that lead kept shrinking, and we're all familiar as fans watching our own angst about it. What is it like in the clubhouse when you're during a streak like that?
It's terrible because nobody knows the answer. I just think, I want to say that they're probably during that time when we had that big lead in August. Um, I think management, I think Charlie could have done a better job about giving guys a day off and resting people. I think a lot of guys, you play that long, in that many games, and go through the summers that you go through when you have to travel. Uh, when you get into September, you're tired. You're tired, and I think there could have been a little bit better management in regards to maybe giving some guys a day off to give them a breather. Maybe that was it. But I remember Willie calling a team meeting. And he just said, listen, guys, and I think I'm getting this right. He said, "Don't worry about Charlie, the manager. Just keep your eyes on me." And so he kind of took over the team a little bit. You know, he'd put the steel on, he'd have the guys bunt, you know, we'd hit and run or do something. And you know, Willie, Willie went over and talked to Charlie. He said, "Don't worry, you know, these guys are, you know, I'm helping them out." And yeah, it was a real difficult time to get through that, you know, and I mean, it went down to the last game of the season, you know. Dave Kingman hits the home run. I remember last ground ball, Nate Colbert's up, and we have the lead. And it's the ninth inning, 2 outs. Juan Marichal is on the mound, and Nate Colbert's the hitter, and he hits me a ground ball, routine ground ball. I pick it up, and I take my usual crow hop. Well, as soon as I catch the ball, and I didn't see him until late, Tito Fuentes is running from second base straight past, right into Juan Marichal. He's right in the path of my throw. And I'm going, holy, and it missed him. It missed him because he's running to celebrate with Juan Marichal before we even get the final out. But I almost hit him in the coconut, and who knows what would have happened then.
My other question is there a difference in how you play shortstop depending on whether you're playing behind a Marichal, a Perry, a McDowell, or a Montefusco, or is it pretty much the same with all of them?
A lot of it has to do with the hitter. And, you know, you take into your knowledge of the hitters, and you can make, you know, certain adjustments. You know, if you got a good fastball pitcher, Montefusco liked to, you know, he liked to threw hard, threw the ball usually away, had a slider away. You know, with a right-handed hitter, I can cheat maybe a little bit more up the middle. But I remember Gaylord, you know, and I'd be positioned, and he'd look over at me, and you know, he without anybody, he would move me. He would move me, you know. Hey, I want you to play this guy in the hole. Hey, I want you to play this guy up the middle. You know, those types of things. But definitely there's adjustments made. And I wouldn't say they're really big adjustments, but, you know, baseball is a game of inches anyway. So if it's a step or two steps, you know, one way or the other, it might increase my odds. But yeah, you do make different fielding decisions based on those, you know, factors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Chris, you got time for a few more?
Sure.
Wonderful. Steve, you're up.
I had a conversation yesterday with Ed Logan Jr.
Oh,
Supposed to be on tonight. I guess either he forgot or whatever, but regards from Ed Logan Jr. I'm sure you got a million stories from Eddie Logan, but we'll say
I have one, but we have female people here. I'm not sure if it would be.
I'm sure they're very interesting. You mentioned a couple of things. One is Willie Mays helping people. He was always dressed to the hilt. The cars he drove.
Oh yeah, it was dressed to the hilt. He got all his freaking clothes free.
Well,
hell.
I remember the 2017 Cactus League luncheon. I attended a few of them here in the Phoenix area. That was the one where they honored the first Black players to play in Phoenix during spring training. It was Mays, Irwin, Doby, and Banks. And Mays was the only one still living, and he honored all of them and talked about himself and talked about the others. But I ended up entering the luncheon with Chris DeRocha, Leo's son.
Oh,
and we walked over to Mays, and the first thing Mays said to him was, "Chris, you okay? You need anything? You have enough money?" That was just the way he was.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, and you might remember this place, my mother had a very close cousin in Los Angeles who worked for Don Loper. Does that place ring a bell with the
No,
shirts? That was
I'm
before Izod.
Oh, no.
Came into that. It was a factory. And my mother's cousin was very friendly with Gene Baker and Steve Bilko and a lot of the guys that played for the Hollywood teams.
Hmm.
Well, Mays came in, and it was my first autograph. It was a postcard to Steven, best wishes, Willie Mays. And that was 1958.
Wow.
Some of the guys know the story. We put it in my mother's desk in the hallway.
Yeah.
I don't know, 3-4 years later, I'm looking for it. No, I threw it out. It took up a lot of room. There went my first Willie Mays autograph. But
Wow.
I have plenty of them ever since. But if you want to tell an Eddie Logan story, let the women hold their ears.
You know what? I think that's got to wait because
Okay.
it's a
Thank you for coming on.
It's a
This
classic.
is great. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, Jeff Wagner, you're up.
Hi, thanks. Chris, like Gary, I was 11 when you started up with the Giants, and I have a lot of fond memories of you as well. And like Gary, I was disappointed when you were traded in '77. So just two really quick questions. What was the circumstances of you being traded in '77? Because you're still playing pretty good ball, and
Yeah.
Tim Foley is,
I
it's
know.
okay.
No,
But
yeah.
also, real quick, in your first year, you were mentioned how you were in awe of being surrounded by Marichal and Mays and McCovey and Bonds. How did you feel that year when you faced for the first time the likes of Gibson and Seaver and Fergie Jenkins and Steve Carlton and those kind of guys? Were you intimidated at all, or was it a challenge you were looking forward to?
I think, it's challenging and you finally, I got over the, the fear and all that other stuff, fairly quickly. But those guys, again, those are the guys that you used to watch, on TV. And I was fortunate that I don't think Bob Gibson ever threw at me, which I was very thankful for. But I have a funny story about Tom Seaver. We're playing at Shea, and LaGuardia Airport's right near there, and it's a day game. Seaver's on the hill, and I'm in the batter's box, and the plane takes off and flies directly right behind Tom Seaver. So I call timeout, and Seaver looks at me and I point to the airplane and he looks back at me and he goes, "What, are you afraid you're going to hit it?" I said, and probably ended up striking out, in that situation. But no, those guys, you always kind of get up for those great pitchers. I remember Bobby Bonds coming back one time and we're facing Bob Gibson. And he goes, "Hey, he's tipping. He's holding his glove higher on the fastball than he does on the breaking ball. Every single pitch that he's going to throw you." Well, so we had his signs. He struck out 15 that day. So anyway, it's always a challenge when you face the good ones, the Hall of Fame players. Yeah.
And I think
So
Jeff
were you
wanted to know
surprised?
about the trade.
Oh, the trade, yeah. If you guys remember, Spec Richardson was the general manager at the time. And I'm coming up on my free agent year. And basically there were 3 shortstops at that time that were probably the best in the National League. It was Dave Concepcion, Larry Bowen, myself. Well, Dave and Larry both signed a 5-year contract with their teams. So I figure, well, I'm right in line with that. I'd like to have a 5-year contract. And Spec said, "There's no way we're giving you a 5-year contract. That's just not happening. We'll give you a 2-year contract." And I said, no, I want a 5. And that went on back and forth like that. until, they're obligated to send you a contract in December. It's usually just a 1-year contract, basic thing. And, normally you have your negotiation and you rip up that contract. You don't even sign it and send it back. You just throw it away. I kept that contract. And we went to spring training. I went up to Spec and I said, here, I'm signed for a year. You have me now for a year. And I said, I'm not going to negotiate, unless you're going to get into the 5-year deal. If you're not, then you have me for a year. So that's when he contacted, and it goes funny. Charlie Fox is now the general manager of Montreal. And they gave Montreal permission to talk to me, and I signed a 5-year contract, and that's why I left.
I can't blame you.
Thank you, Jeff. Tom O'Doul. Tom, you gotta unmute, Tom.
Looks like he is unmuted.
I know.
But now he's muted.
Unmute again, Tom. Talk. Can't hear you. Now.
Maybe his volume's turned off.
Try your volume. All right. Anybody else who did not have a question? Howard, finish it up.
Hi, Chris. I happen to grow up in Queens and in New York, and I didn't get a chance to see you play that often, but I did see you as a rookie because I was still living at home in '71 before I went to college. So at least I saw you, and I always been an old Giant fan. At least I got to see you. I went to as many games as I could when the Giants came to Shea to play the Mets. So I did see you once at least as a rookie. I want to ask you something about Kingman. As you know, he eventually went to the Mets. And I don't know if he was a malcontent or not, but
No.
he didn't get along with the press. He didn't get along with teammates. He wasn't a very nice guy. And then the Mets eventually got rid of him the same night they traded Seaver to Cincinnati. So I was wondering what Kingman was like as a teammate. Was he as bad as the media made it out to be, or was it just a little grudge the media didn't like he was too aloof maybe? I never really knew what the problem was. And of course he came back to the Mets eventually for a short time later on in his career.
Well, I don't like the adjectives that you used, aloof or whatever. He just was, he was just a little bit more private, a little closed off, not really a sociable guy. And, he didn't like, the attention, when it came to the press and things like that. So, and, I don't know about standoffish, but he was, just a little bit different in that regard. He was always, he'd love to pull pranks on guys. I mean, I saw that side of him. And so, I would stand up for, for Dave, rather than saying, yeah, he was an asshole, nobody liked him. It wasn't like that. It really wasn't.
Well, that's good to know because, of course, the New York press wasn't that friendly to him because I guess he just didn't cooperate with them much. But he certainly, I remember the 3 home runs he hit in his first game ever. Was it his first major league game with the Giants? He had 3 home runs.
Yeah, I remember when he signed out of USC and was sent to Amarillo. And his first at bat, I'm on second base. And the pitcher throws a ball, it's like a slider, and it's literally 6 inches outside. He hits this ball on a line drive duck hook down the left field line, home run. And I'm going, oh my God, this guy is unbelievable. He hit a ball in Chicago. And if you know Wrigley Field,
I've been there.
Okay. There's a street over about the left center field wall. If you look from home plate, you look over left center, there's a street there. He hit the second house roof on the street. It was a joke. He hit a ball in Candlestick He hit a pop up. You used to say he had that elevator swing where he'd swing straight up. He hit a pop up into the left field stands. And those that have been to Candlestick Park, you know how wide that foul territory is over there. It's huge. Third baseman is running over to see if he's going to be able to catch it or it's going to go in the stands. Dave doesn't know where the ball is. So he's just running. He's running from first. He's on his way to second. The wind catches that ball and it drops in fair territory for a stand-up double. But it was like we used to call him the Moon Man because he was kind of a space cadet.
Sure.
He had no idea where the ball was, and that's why he was running. So anyway.
Okay. Thanks for the info. I appreciate it.
Chris,
All
I got one last question from Dennis, who couldn't get on tonight.
Okay.
How did the other players view Willie Mays? Did they see him as a veteran who could advise them, or was he seen as a god to be worshipped but left alone?
I like the God to be worshipped, that part. I don't know about to be left alone. Like I said, he had that, if you're a teammate and you were, around him a little bit, you knew how, you could break through that ice, but you were the one that had to make the first move. That's the only thing I have to say. You had to make the first move. He was always available to help anybody, but you had to be the one to kind of go up to him first.
And the last question I'm going to finish up regarding you. How did it feel when Peter McGowan came to you, or the Giants ownership, and decided to get you on that, deservedly so, on the Giants Wall of Fame?
Oh, that's such an honor. When you think of all the great players that have played with the Giants. And, it's always been my favorite team. I never wanted to leave San Francisco. And to have that, that ranks up there. There's another, I was voted the Willie McCovey Award in 1987. And that award probably means more to me than a lot of them, because it's voted by your peers, by your players and the coaching staff. And I think today they let the fans vote and they give them a percentage of the ballots or whatever. But back then it just really meant a lot to me, because of not what being the inspirational or whatever it is, but it was because it was a Willie McCovey Award. When you talk about Mays always overshadowed Willie in regards to, his aura or whatever he did. But what a class act Willie McCovey was. And I think in my first year I had 33 errors. 33. You don't even think about that today. I probably would have had 50 if Willie wasn't there with his height and his abilities over there. But I love that man. Yeah. So,
Chris, we cannot thank you enough. Let's give Chris a great round of applause. Chris, thanks for hitting leadoff in our tribute to Willie Mays this month. Please don't be a stranger. We loved having you, and the admiration for you in this group is through the roof. So,
thank you.
Once again, thanks again, Chris.
All right, guys.
Be well.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you.
Yeah, go Giants.
Go Giants.
Go Giants.
I'll hang here for a while if anybody wants to talk Giant baseball. But until then, we'll see each other next Thursday when I guess Norm will be interviewing me and I'll be the guest speaker. So good night, unless you want to hang around, talk Giant baseball. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Gary,